You ever take a job that feels wrong from the first second, but you take it anyway because your stomach won't shut up and your bank account's gasping for air? Yeah, that's exactly how this started. It was a gray afternoon when the email showed up. No sender name. No subject. Just one line in the body. $700 for one night. Babysitting. Church property. Cash. Below it was an address in a town I'd never heard of, Hollow's Reach, and a number with no name attached. That was it. No introduction, no job description, no details. The kind of offer any sane person would delete on sight. But I wasn't exactly swimming in sanity or money. I stared at the screen for a long minute, chewing on the inside of my cheek. My rent was overdue. My car was on life support. And my last gig, watching over a rich guy's epileptic cat, ended after I accidentally gave it caffeine pills. Long story. So I called the number. A woman answered. Her voice was brittle, like someone talking through cracked glass. You'll arrive before sunset, she said. The child's name is Eli. He doesn't speak. You'll stay until sunrise. Bring no one. Tell no one. Do you accept? Not a question about my experience. No mention of references. Not even a hello. Yes, I said. And just like that, it was settled. Hollow's Reach wasn't on most maps. I had to drive 2 hours through winding mountain roads just to find the turnoff, a crooked wooden sign half covered in moss. Trees loomed like watching eyes as my car crept through the last few miles. No cell service. No radio. Just the sound of gravel crunching under tires and my own breath in the cold air. Then I saw it. St. Alora's Chapel. The church rose from the mist like something forgotten by time. Tall, narrow, with a pointed steeple and blackened stone walls that looked more like a mausoleum than a place of worship. Vines crawled up the sides like veins. The iron gate creaked as I pushed it open. A woman stood at the front steps. Her face was pale, almost translucent, like she hadn't been outside in years. She wore a long black coat, buttoned up to her throat, and her hair was tied so tight it looked painful. "You're Dave?" she asked, her voice just as brittle as before. I nodded. She glanced around, as if checking for someone behind me. Then she reached into her coat and handed me a manila envelope. "Your payment. All of it. Do not open it until you've completed the night." I looked down at it, then back up. "You're paying me up front? You'll understand why." I opened my mouth to ask a dozen questions. Who's the kid? Why at church? What kind of babysitting job needed secrecy? But she cut me off. "No mirrors inside," she said. "Cover any reflective surface. Keep the candles unlit. And whatever happens, don't look into Eli's eyes for too long." I blinked. "What?" But she was already walking away. "Wait." I took a step forward. "What do you mean, don't look into his eyes?" She paused, halfway down the cracked stone path, and looked back over her shoulder. "Just remember," she said softly, "he's not always the one watching." Then she disappeared into the fog. I stood there for a full minute, envelope in one hand, the other gripping my duffel bag like a lifeline. The church door was slightly ajar, groaning as the wind nudged it open. A shadow moved just beyond it, and that's when I saw him. A little boy, standing in the doorway, eyes black as coal, watching me, waiting. The road twisted like a dying serpent as I climbed deeper into the mountains. Fog clung to the trees, thick and damp, curling around my windshield like fingers trying to hold me back. My GPS had given up 10 miles ago. All I had now was the strange, formal letter in my glove box and a vague set of directions scribbled in sharp, elegant handwriting. At the top of the hill, I finally saw it. St. Alora's Chapel. It looked like something pulled straight out of a nightmare. Stone walls eaten by ivy, shattered stained glass windows, a crooked bell tower that leaned just enough to make your stomach shift. The place looked ancient, as if time itself had decided to abandon it. I parked next to a rusted gate and stepped out. The air was cold. Not just chilly, cold in that way that sinks into your bones, like the world itself had forgotten warmth existed here. The woman was already waiting. She stood near the front steps, barely visible through the mist. She was thin, pale, maybe in her early 40s, dressed in a long black coat that flapped in the wind. Her hands were clutched around a small silver crucifix, her eyes sunken, ringed with the kind of shadows that come from sleepless years, not nights. "You're Dave Holloway?" she asked without a smile. I nodded. "Yeah, you must be. Call me Miriam." She motioned toward the chapel door. I looked around, expecting maybe a car, but there was none. She must have walked here. Or maybe she never left. "Inside. He's waiting." I hesitated. "Eli, right?" The boy. Her eyes darted toward the door, as if saying his name might summon something. Yes. Eli. There was a pause, long and brittle. You need to understand something, she said finally, voice low. He's different. Different how? She didn't answer right away. Her hand tightened around the crucifix. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out an old-fashioned flip phone. Here. My number's programmed in. But don't call unless it's an emergency. A real emergency. I took the phone slowly. Why not just give me your regular cell? I won't always have it with me, she said. And sometimes the signal gets lost around here. Or blocked. Blocked? Her eyes flicked up to mine. They were sharp and glassy, like someone always on the edge of panic. Don't light candles around him, she said suddenly. Don't leave mirrors uncovered. And never, never, stare into his eyes for more than a few seconds. I raised an eyebrow. That in the job description? You're not here to question. You're here to watch him. Just for tonight. That's all. Keep him safe. And keep yourself sane. I wanted to laugh. I really did. But something about her voice cut the humor right out of me. She turned without another word and walked down the gravel path, swallowed by fog like the forest had opened up just to let her in. I stood there for a while, phone in hand, her warnings spinning in my head like broken glass. No candles. No mirrors. No eye contact. What kind of kid was I babysitting? Eventually, I climbed the steps and pushed open the heavy oak door. It groaned like an old man in pain. Inside, it was dark. Dust floated through the air like ash. The smell hit me immediately, old wood, burnt incense, and something metallic like rust or blood. The pews were lined up like silent watchers, half of them broken, others covered in sheets. The stained glass windows were cracked, their holy images disfigured by time. At the far end stood the altar, draped in black cloth. And standing next to it, just standing, was the child. Eli. He didn't move as I walked closer. He didn't blink. He just stared. I stopped about 10 feet away. He looked to be around 6. Pale. Thin. Black sweater. His hair was dark and messy, like he'd just woken up from a storm. But it was his eyes that held me. Pitch black. No whites. No color. Just 2 pools of darkness that didn't reflect a single ounce of light. And the moment I looked into them, just for a second, I felt something shift inside me. A cold breeze swept through the chapel, though every door was shut. I blinked. Hey there, buddy, I said, trying to sound casual. My voice came out thinner than I liked. No response. Name's Dave. I'll be watching you tonight. Still nothing. He didn't even seem to breathe. I tried to smile. You, like board games? TV? Got any favorite cartoons? He tilted his head slightly. Just slightly. And then he smiled. Not a child's smile. A knowing one. And without moving his lips, I heard a voice in my head that wasn't mine, soft and calm like a whisper through stone. Welcome back. My skin went cold. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just here to babysit. I was here to witness something. And whatever it was, it had already begun. The church groaned. Not from wind or footsteps. This sound came from deep within the stone. It echoed through the wooden pews like a breath held too long. I looked down at Eli. He stood at the foot of the altar, small and motionless, his arms hanging limp by his sides. I hadn't heard him move from the hallway behind me, but there he was again, closer than before. Always quiet. The kid hadn't said a single word since I got here. Hey, I said gently, crouching to his level. You hungry or anything? He didn't blink. His eyes, his eyes were solid black. Not dark brown, not shadowed by the chapel's poor lighting. Just black. No whites. No pupils. Just 2 glassy voids staring into me. I flinched. I didn't mean to. But something about those eyes, it wasn't just the color. It was what I felt looking into them. Like I was falling forward into a tunnel with no end. He tilted his head, just a little, and kept staring. No food, huh? All right. We'll figure something out. I stood and walked toward the small kitchen tucked behind the altar. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust coated the shelves. There were mismatched teacups and a few faded cans of beans, all past expiration. A rusting kettle sat on the stove, like it was waiting for someone to light it again. I opened the fridge. Nothing but silence and a faint whiff of mold. That's when I heard it. A voice, soft male, whispering. Latin, maybe? It came from the main hall, where Eli had been. I turned fast, heart kicking in my ribs. Eli? No answer. Just the creak of the old wooden floorboards. I stepped back into the sanctuary, eyes scanning the pews and shadows. The chapel was dimly lit, but the flickering candlelight from the altar offered just enough to see shapes. Rows of old benches, cracked walls, and one small figure sitting in the front pew. It was Eli. Back turned to me, shoulders stiff. I walked slowly, boots thudding quietly on the wood. I was maybe 10 feet from him when I noticed his hand. He was gripping the edge of the pew too tightly, white knuckles, trembling fingers. "Eli," I said softer this time. "Are you okay?" Then he spoke. But it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, far too deep for a 6-year-old. Calm, slow, like someone remembering a bedtime prayer. In principio erat verbum, et verbum erat apud Deum. The Latin rolled from his mouth like he'd said it 1,000 times. My skin crawled. I felt colder, like the air around me had thinned. I stepped back. "Eli, stop," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's not funny." He turned his head. Just his head. Not his shoulders. It turned too far, almost unnaturally, until those black eyes locked onto mine again. Then he smiled. A small, knowing smile. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he had seen something I hadn't. I backed up until I hit one of the pews behind me. The wood creaked loud under my weight, breaking the silence. Just like that, the smile was gone. Eli blinked once, then twice, and looked confused, as if he'd just woken up. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice dry. He didn't respond. Just looked down at his hands, breathing slow. I needed air. I turned away, walking quickly down the aisle and pushing open the old side door. The night outside was cool and damp, and I sucked in a deep breath like I'd just escaped a nightmare. What the hell was this place? I leaned against the outer wall of the church, eyes scanning the twisted tree-line. It was dead quiet, no wind, no bugs, no rustling. Like the forest itself was holding its breath. I rubbed my temples and muttered, "This is just a weird job. One night. Get through the night. Take the money and go." Behind me, I heard the faint creak of a door hinge. I turned and saw Eli, standing in the doorway, bathed in candlelight. Still silent. Still watching. And still those pitch-black eyes. Something inside me whispered, "You've seen those eyes before." I shoved the thought away. Too late. Because that night, I didn't sleep. Not even for a second. I lay on the old chapel cot with my coat pulled over me, eyes open, staring at the flickering shadows on the ceiling. And Eli sat in the corner of the room. The whole night. Just staring. And whispering things I couldn't quite hear. I woke up to the sound of scratching. Not like nails on wood, but like charcoal scraping across paper. At first, I thought I was dreaming. My body was still half paralyzed by sleep, but the noise was too real. It came from the next room. Eli's room. I rubbed the tiredness from my eyes and looked at my phone. 3:11 a.m. Of course. The kind of hour where the world forgets how to feel normal. The hallway felt colder than usual as I walked barefoot toward his door. The air was thick, like something was pressing against my chest. The old floorboards groaned under each step, echoing through the church's hollow halls. The door was open. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, back to me. His tiny frame was hunched over a stack of yellowed paper. A single candle flickered beside him. I swear I hadn't lit it. He didn't turn around. His hand moved quickly, rhythmically across the page, scratching out lines and shapes and strange symbols. "Eli," I said softly. My voice barely made a sound. He paused. Then slowly he turned his head, not his body, just his head, until I could see one side of his face. Those pitch-black eyes glinted in the candlelight. "You shouldn't be awake," he whispered. But the voice, it wasn't his. It was too deep, too calm, like someone who had seen everything and had grown bored with it. I felt my throat tighten. "What are you drawing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Eli turned back to his work. "Memories," he said. I stepped closer. The candlelight trembled, casting crooked shadows across the room. I knelt beside him and looked at the pages. They weren't just drawings. They were scenes. One showed a man standing at the edge of a pit, arms raised, surrounded by writhing shadows. Latin words were scrawled above it in jagged handwriting. Another showed a burning church. Not just any church, this church. St. Alora's, clearly drawn with its crooked spire and broken cross. But the third one stopped my breath. It was me, as a child, curled up under a pew, crying, fire behind me, and something dark reaching for me from the altar. My vision blurred for a second. I stumbled back. How could he have drawn this? I never told anyone. Not even my therapist back when I tried to get help. That night had always lived in the shadows of my mind. Too messy to explain, too terrifying to understand. Eli looked up. His face was blank. "You left her," he said. My stomach turned cold. "Who?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Your sister. No one knew about her. Not anymore. Not after the fire." I backed away from the drawings, from him, and nearly tripped over the edge of the rug. Eli didn't move. The candle flickered again, then went out. Total darkness. I scrambled backward toward the hallway. My hands found the edge of the doorframe just as a sound, like a low, breathy chuckle, rose from the black. "Eli?" I whispered. No answer. Then a rustling behind me. When I turned back on the hallway light, he was already back in bed, tucked under the blanket, eyes closed. The drawings were gone. Every single page. I stood there, breathing hard, heart racing like it was trying to climb out of my chest. What the hell is happening in this place? And more importantly, how did he know? Because I hadn't just left my sister behind in that fire. I'd never forgiven myself for it. And now somehow Eli, or something in him, knew exactly where to press. And it wasn't done yet. The morning after the whispering started, I needed air, real air, not the damp, incense-stained breath that filled St. Alora's chapel like a disease. I hadn't slept, not really. Eli had stood at the edge of my bed for most of the night, unmoving. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. Just stared with those pitch-black eyes that felt like they weren't just looking at me. They were inside me. So I left. I told myself I'd just grab coffee from the gas station at the edge of Hollow's Reach. Maybe pick up some painkillers too. My head had been pounding since the Latin started pouring from Eli's mouth in his sleep. The town was nearly silent, like it always was. I passed the same 3 houses I'd seen on the way in. Shutters closed, yards unkempt, no sign of life except the occasional curtain flicker, like someone was checking to see if I'd left yet. It felt like Hollow's Reach didn't have residents, just watchers. The gas station was the only building that looked alive. Its flickering sign buzzed weakly above the door, Fry's Fuel and Feed. I stepped in, and a dull bell gave a tired jingle. The smell of dust and burnt coffee beans hit me like a slap. There were no shelves, just a few coolers humming loudly, a counter cluttered with receipts and an unplugged radio, and an old man sitting behind it with a cigarette in his mouth, unlit, unmoving. He didn't look up at first. Just stared at the countertop like he was reading something only he could see. His skin was paper-thin, liver-spotted, and cracked like a dry riverbed. A name tag on his vest said Marlin in faded red. I cleared my throat. "Morning." "Nothing. I'm babysitting a kid up at the church," I said casually, reaching for the coffee pot behind the counter. It was cold and thick like motor oil. I poured it anyway. "Place gives me the creeps. You know anything about it?" Marlin blinked slowly, then finally turned his head toward me. His eyes were pale blue, but cloudy, like cataracts had been fighting their way through for years. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. "That church doesn't keep people out." I frowned. "What?" "It keeps things in," he said, dragging the cigarette from one corner of his mouth to the other with a cracked yellow fingernail. I let out a nervous chuckle. "You rehearsed that line or something?" He didn't smile. He looked past me like something stood just behind my shoulder. I turned, but no one was there. "You're not the first," he said. "They always bring someone new when it's time." Now he had my attention. I put the coffee down. "What do you mean by they? And what time?" He slid open a drawer and pulled out a weathered folder. He placed it on the counter. "Read." Inside was a copy of an old newspaper. I had to lean in to make out the title. "Local priest found dead after fire in crypt." The article was dated April 13th, 1902. My stomach twisted. The story was about a man named Father Cardo. It said he was devoted but eccentric, believed in rituals no longer sanctioned by the church. There had been rumors of secret masses, blood rites, and even human vessels. The town had grown afraid of him. One night, he locked himself in the crypt beneath the chapel, and the church caught fire from below. His body was never recovered. Beneath the article was a photo, cracked and yellowed with age. It showed a group of people standing in front of St. Alora's. Their faces were serious, fearful. One man in the center wore priest robes. He was tall, thin, his eyes dark even in the grainy black and white print. But it wasn't the priest who made me recoil. It was the boy standing next to him. Small, hands at his sides, eyes completely black. Just like Eli. I snapped the folder shut. This is some prank, right? Urban legend crap." Marlin shook his head slowly. "Cardo don't die like the rest of us. He sinks his soul in something, buries it deep. Then he waits." "For what?" "You," he said simply. "Or someone like you. Someone who'll open the door. I stared at him. My mouth was dry. Why would anyone open a door like that? Marlon lit his cigarette finally, flame trembling against his wrinkled fingers. He didn't answer right away. When he did, the words chilled me more than the cold cup of coffee ever could. Because the devil don't come as horns and fire anymore. He comes as a child. Quiet. Small. Needing help. And you? You look like someone who wants to be needed. I left the station without saying goodbye. As I walked back to the church, the wind picked up behind me, carrying whispers I couldn't quite understand. But they felt familiar. Like they'd been waiting for me. Like they knew I'd be back. I don't know what time I woke up, but it wasn't because of an alarm. It was the sound, soft at first, like someone breathing just behind the walls. Then it turned into whispering. Faint. Male. Chanting in a language I didn't understand. I lay still in the narrow cot, eyes wide open, blanket gripped in both hands. My body was awake, but my mind was still stuck between dream and reality. The whispering didn't stop. I sat up. The church was dark. The only light came from a red bulb above the chapel door, flickering like it was dying. I checked Eli's bed across the room. Empty. My chest tightened. That kid barely moved, and now he was gone. I stood up, my knees cracking. The cold floor bit into my bare feet as I stepped into the hallway. The whispers were louder now. They came from behind the wooden walls, old, rotted wood that creaked even under the smallest weight. It was like they were alive, groaning and speaking just beyond the surface. Eli? I called. No answer. The sound changed direction. It wasn't behind the walls anymore. It was above me, in the ceiling. I looked up. The attic door was open. I swear to you, I don't remember it ever being opened before. I don't even remember seeing the pull cord. I stared at it for a long minute, hoping I was wrong, hoping I was still dreaming. Then, slow as ever, I grabbed a chair from the hallway and pulled it beneath the attic hatch. My hands trembled as I climbed up, pushing my head into the dark. Cold air hit me like a slap. It smelled like burnt incense and wet stone. Eli? I whispered again. I pulled myself up fully. The attic was massive, dusty beams, forgotten statues of saints with cracked faces, broken pews piled in corners like discarded coffins. A single stained glass window cast strange light across the wooden floor, green and red and blue, flickering with each gust of wind. In the center of the room, sitting cross-legged, was Eli. His back was to me. He was talking, but not like a kid. His voice was steady, adult-like, calm. And he wasn't speaking English. It sounded like Latin, but I didn't need a translator to know the words were wrong. My body went cold. Eli? I said, barely more than a breath. He stopped speaking. His head turned just enough for me to see part of his face. His lips were stretched into a thin smile. Why do you pretend you don't remember, Dave? He said. I froze. What? He stood slowly and faced me. His eyes, still pitch black, reflected nothing. Not even light. Just void. Like someone had scooped out his soul and filled the hole with something that wasn't human. You saw me before, he whispered. Long ago. You were a child, hiding under the pews. The flames were so warm, weren't they? I stumbled back. No, that wasn't real. That was a nightmare, I muttered. Eli took a step toward me. His shadow stretched across the attic like it had a mind of its own. You were marked, he said. Chosen. That night, when the fire touched your skin and left no scar. You think that was an accident? I was shaking now, nearly falling off the chair as I backed toward the attic entrance. And then I heard it again. Not from Eli. From the walls. Dozens of voices. Chanting. Moaning. Laughing. Some sounded like children. Some like old men. All of them speaking in that same twisted Latin. Eli tilted his head like he was listening too. They remember you, he said. So does he. Who? I asked. He smiled wider. His voice dropped into a whisper. Cardo. I didn't wait. I turned and dropped down from the attic, landing hard on the chair and nearly falling over. I slammed the attic door shut and stumbled back into the hall. The whispering faded, but my heart didn't slow. I ran back to the guest room, shut the door, and shoved a chair under the handle. Eli returned 2 minutes later. He said nothing. He just climbed into bed, pulled the covers over himself, and turned toward the wall. I didn't sleep that night, not even a second, because the walls kept breathing, and every now and then they called my name. I hadn't slept. Not really. Just shut my eyes and tried to pretend that the whispers weren't real. That Eli's voice hadn't shifted into something older than time. That his drawings, those horrible things, were just the product of a disturbed child and not messages meant for me. But morning came, gray and heavy, and I was still here. Still trapped in this dead church, babysitting a boy whose eyes looked like they'd been carved out by shadows. Eli was sitting on the cold stone floor of the nave, quietly stacking hymnals into a tower. His movements were slow and strangely precise, like he was building something that had to be just right. I didn't speak to him. Not anymore. Not after last night. Instead, I wandered toward the pulpit, just to give myself something to do. Maybe I thought I'd find a Bible to hold or a half-finished sermon. Maybe I was hoping for a distraction. Anything but Eli. The pulpit was old. Black wood. Cracked at the edges. When I stepped up behind it, the air felt different. Thicker. Like breathing under a wet blanket. I ran my fingers along the inside edge, half expecting splinters. That's when I felt the latch. It clicked softly under my thumb. My breath caught. I crouched, pried open the hidden compartment beneath the pulpit, and pulled out something that made my skin crawl just to touch it. A book. Bound in something that looked like scorched leather, with a blackened iron cross melted onto the cover. It stank of mildew and old smoke. I sat down right there on the steps, book in my lap, heart thudding like a warning drum. The first page was blank. The second wasn't. This is not confession. It is containment. The handwriting was jagged and burned into the page like it had been written with a hot nail. Each word felt sharp, alive in a way I didn't like. It went on. Father Cardo, the priest from the newspaper, the one who was burned alive right here in this church. This was his journal. He wrote about rituals, about binding things from the in-between. He believed that good and evil were not separate forces but energies, and that if channeled correctly, both could be stored in human vessels. Children were ideal, he said, empty, pure, capable of holding divine weight without shattering. I stopped reading. Outside, Eli had knocked over the tower of books. He was now facing the altar, completely still. His head tilted slightly, as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. I swallowed hard and kept reading. Cardo talked about one ritual. The last one he hadn't finished. One that had gone wrong. He called it the Cradle of Embers. He had taken a child, no name, and tried to bind into him a sliver of eternal knowledge. But something else came through. Not a sliver of heaven. Not wisdom. But Cardo's own hunger. His own madness. That was the final entry. But there was something else, tucked into the back cover. A torn photo. I held it up with trembling fingers. It was of the church, back when it was still alive, bright, full of pews and people. But there, in the background, was the same boy. Same dark eyes. Same blank expression. Eli. But the photo was dated 1972. I stared at it for a long time, heart pounding louder with each passing second. The boy hadn't aged. Not a day. Not a wrinkle. He'd been here for decades. I slowly turned my head. Eli was standing now. He was looking directly at me, those bottomless black eyes locked onto mine. And he smiled. Not a child's smile. Not even human. A knowing smile. As if he knew I'd finally remembered something. As if the trap had just sprung shut. I woke up to the sound of whispering again. At first, I thought it was just another dream. Maybe I'd left a window open, and the wind was playing tricks on me. But the whisper wasn't just soft, it was clear. It spoke my name. Dave. I sat up on the dusty old cot the church had left for me in the sacristy. The air was thick. The candles I had lit before falling asleep had gone out, though I hadn't heard the wind blow or seen any draft. The flame didn't just die. It was taken. I rubbed my eyes, stood, and opened the creaky wooden door to Eli's room. He was sitting up on the bed, cross-legged, wide awake. The shadows in the corners of his room seemed deeper than they should have been. I couldn't see the far wall, even though the small oil lamp on his nightstand was still burning. And Eli, he was smiling. That alone would have been strange. But it wasn't just the smile. It was the stillness. That boy hadn't spoken a single word to me since I arrived 3 nights ago. But now his mouth moved slowly, stretching unnaturally wide, and his pitch-black eyes locked on mine like they could dig into my skull. "Do you remember the fire, Dave?" he asked, his voice not his own. It was older, wetter, like it had been underground a long time and finally had lungs again. I backed away without thinking, hitting the doorframe. "What did you just say?" He tilted his head, almost like mocking me. "You left her in the pew. You ran. You were 8 years old, and you ran." My stomach turned. I hadn't told anyone about that. Not even during therapy. Not even drunk. I was 8. My sister was 5. We were playing hide and seek during service in the back of our hometown church. The place caught fire, an electrical thing, they said. Everyone got out, except her. I told them I didn't see where she went. But I did. I just didn't go after her. And now this thing knew. Who told you that? I asked, my voice cracking. Eli rose from the bed, his tiny feet not making a sound against the wood. The flame of the oil lamp dimmed until it was barely aglow. He stepped forward, slow, like he had all the time in the world. I've known you for a long time, Dave. We've shared fire before. I stumbled backward into the hallway. The church groaned above us, old beams sighing like breath. I turned to run but heard the boy say something else, something that stopped me cold. You wanted her to die. I froze. My hands were shaking. I didn't want to hear more. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't move. He was lying. He had to be lying. No, I whispered. That's not true. But in the silence that followed, a memory surfaced. A moment I'd buried so deep I barely knew it was real. A day before the fire. My sister broke my favorite action figure. I told her I hated her. I'd looked her in the eyes and said, I wish you weren't here. And now, that voice was feeding it back to me, making it truth. Who are you? I whispered. That's when Eli, or whatever was in him, walked over to the mirror across from the confessional. He stood before it. You won't see me in there, he said, smiling again. But you'll see what's left of you. I didn't want to. But I looked. The mirror was foggy, almost black, like it had been dipped in ink. But in the center I saw something not me. Not my reflection. It was me, but burning. Flames climbed up my arms. My mouth was open in a scream, but no sound came out. And in my eyes black. Pitch black. Just like Eli's. I staggered back, my knees weak, my breath short. This wasn't just a haunting. This wasn't a ghost or a possession. This boy wasn't just possessed by something. He was something. He was a prison. And whatever was inside had been watching me, waiting, whispering. The truth hit me like a shovel to the chest. Eli wasn't the problem. He was the door. And it was opening. I should have left the night Eli floated above the bed. I told myself I'd finish the week, get my cash, and never look back. But now, standing in front of the church's heavy wooden doors, heart hammering in my chest, I realize something's very wrong. I push on the door again. It doesn't budge. No way. I try the other one. Nothing. I ram my shoulder against it. Still nothing. The cold seeps through the stone walls like the place is breathing. I turn around and stare at the stained glass windows. The ones that were there earlier. Now they're gone. The walls are solid brick. I blink. No. I walk faster, deeper into the main chapel. Every window is gone. Just smooth, pale stone. The air is still and heavy, like the calm before lightning strikes. I pull out my phone. No signal. I check the time. 3:06 a.m. I haven't even slept. A loud crack echoes from above. I freeze. It's coming from the bell tower. A slow, dragging sound like metal against bone. And then it rings. The bell tolls once. Then again. And again. I cover my ears. No one's up there. No one touched it. It rings 13 times. When it stops, the silence is worse than the sound. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. The kind that feels like it's listening. I stumble backward, breathing hard. My eyes dart around the chapel. The pews look warped, twisted, like they're slouching, drooping like melting wax. My flashlight flickers, even though I just changed the batteries yesterday. That's when I hear it. A voice. Faint. Far away. From the crypt. The door to the crypt, the one I was told never to open, is slightly ajar. I walk toward it slowly. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I step closer. The voice gets clearer. It's not Eli's voice. It's deeper. Ancient. Like 1,000 mouths whispering at once through stone. David. I stop dead. David, come. You've always known. My legs move before I decide to. I make it to the crypt door and shine my light down the steps. The air is thick. Dust swirls like ash. It smells like fire that never went out. I call out, my voice shaky. Eli? Nothing. Just soft whispers. My name again, now said with affection. I take a step down. The floor creaks. Another whisper, closer now. You left me once. You won't leave again. I spin around. Eli is standing behind me at the top of the stairs. He's barefoot, wearing the same pale pajamas he's worn every night, but now there's something different. His eyes. They are black. Pitch black. No whites. No color. Just void. He smiles. Not a child's smile. This one knows too much. It curves just a little too wide. The door won't open, I say to him. He nods slowly. It knows you're not ready to leave. What do you mean it knows? He walks down one step. And another. My breath catches. I take a step back. He says gently, "You were here before, remember?" "I wasn't. You were a child. You saw the fire. You saw me." His voice is two voices now. One layered over the other. One innocent. One not. "You're lying. You're remembering." He touches the wall. It ripples like water. For a second, I see something inside, faces screaming, twisting. Then it vanishes. The walls are alive. I turn and run back up the stairs. But the sanctuary is gone. Instead of pews, there's just a hallway of flickering candles, leading to a door made of bone and rust. There is no exit. There never was. Not for me. Not for him. Not for any of them. And far below, from the crypt, something begins to laugh. Low, slow, and familiar. I woke up on the cold floor. The wooden planks of the chapel were damp with something that smelled like mold and copper. My ears rang. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious, maybe minutes, maybe hours. The last thing I remembered was the walls shaking and Eli's voice saying something in Latin. Something that felt like it pulled pieces of me out. I sat up slowly, my back aching, and looked around. Eli was gone. The candles had all gone out, but the air still shimmered with leftover heat. There was a soft echo, like someone humming deep in the earth beneath me. The church felt alive again. Not just haunted, breathing. I stumbled toward the nave, past the shattered stained glass windows. My legs felt like twigs. My vision pulsed, like reality was struggling to hold its shape. Then I heard it. The creak of the front door. It was impossible. I'd tried those doors. They hadn't budged in 2 days. Not even a crack. But now they were wide open. A figure stood in the doorway. A woman. Hair wild. Face pale like bone. Her dress was soaked and torn, hanging from her thin frame like wet paper. For a second, I didn't recognize her. But then she stepped into the candlelight, and I saw those same eyes. The same mouth that had told me, he's special. Eli's mother. She was shaking, barefoot, and in her hands was a long, thin bundle wrapped in a red cloth. I didn't know what to say. She looked at me like I was a ghost. "You stayed," she whispered, voice cracking. "You were supposed to leave before the blood moon." I swallowed hard, stepping back. "Eli," I said. "Where is he? What is he?" She laughed. It wasn't joy. It was madness. Her body swayed like she might collapse at any second. "Not mine," she muttered. "Never was. I lied. I lied to everyone, including myself." She walked forward and held out the red cloth like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "I tried," she said. "I held him, fed him, sang to him. But he never blinked. Not once in 6 years. Do you understand what that does to a mother?" I unwrapped the cloth with trembling hands. Inside was a dagger. The handle was made of dark wood, carved with tiny symbols that looked like worms crawling in a spiral. The blade was black, not from rust, but from something older. It shimmered like oil and made my stomach twist just to look at it. "What is this?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sank to her knees on the altar steps and whispered, "He needs to die before the last bell. If you wait, there won't be a world left to fix." The silence stretched too long. "Why me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why not you?" She lifted her eyes. Red. Bloodshot. Hollow. "Because he knows I love him," she said. "Even if I know he's not a boy. He used that love. Bent it. Twisted it. But you." She looked at me now, really looked. "You don't love anyone." I flinched. She was right. And wrong. And somehow it didn't matter. A low groan echoed beneath the floorboards. The stone trapdoor at the back of the sanctuary vibrated. Dust fell from the rafters like ash. "It's opening," she whispered. "He's waking fully now." I stepped forward, the dagger trembling in my grip. "What happens if I can't do it?" I asked. She smiled through her tears. "Then we all get to meet Cardo." Suddenly her body jerked. She gasped. Something pulled her back into the shadows, like a hook yanked her spine first. She didn't scream. She just vanished. The silence that followed was louder than anything I'd ever heard. I was alone again. The doors slammed shut. And now I had the dagger. And a choice. The crypt waited. And so did whatever was down there, wearing a child's face. The dagger felt heavy in my hand. Not just in weight, but in meaning. Like it knew what I had to do. Like it remembered the blood it had spilled before. I stood at the top of the crypt stairs, staring down into the dark. Cold air rose from below, carrying with it a smell I can't fully describe: damp stone, burnt wood, and something older, something rotten and alive. The door had opened on its own an hour ago. No lock, no sound, just a soft creak, like the church itself was tired of holding secrets. Eli had gone silent. He sat in the nave for a while, drawing on the back of old hymn sheets. Then he stood up without a word and walked down into the crypt. His black eyes never left mine. They weren't threatening. They weren't even angry. They were calm, like he was done pretending to be a boy. Now the church above me groaned in its bones. Wood shifted. Candles I hadn't lit began to flicker. The bell in the steeple rang again, slow and hollow, though the rope hung untouched. I took the first step down. The stone was cold through my shoes. Each stair felt steeper than the last. Shadows clung to the walls, twitching like insects. The deeper I went, the more I felt something pressing against my skin. Not wind, not air. Something like presence. The crypt was lit by one thing, a single flame floating above the altar. Not in a candle. Just floating. A tongue of fire hanging in midair. Eli stood below it. He wore a white robe now. Where he got it, I don't know. It hung too long on his small frame, brushing the dirt. His eyes, those endless black pools, stared at me. But it wasn't him anymore. I knew that. I could feel it. Dave, the voice said. Not his voice. Not even a child's voice anymore. It came from the walls, from the floor, from behind my ribs. You came. I tightened my grip on the dagger. It pulsed once in my hand, as if urging me forward. You're not him, I said, my voice dry. You're not the boy. No, it answered. The boy was mine the moment he was born. A vessel. Nothing more. I took another step. The flame over the altar didn't move. Eli's body did. He raised one arm slowly and pointed toward a small shape in the corner. A burnt crucifix, half melted, nailed upside down to the stone. Do you remember this? The voice asked. You should. You were there. Images slammed into my mind. Me, hiding behind pews, clutching my sister's hand as smoke filled the old chapel back in my childhood town. I saw fire. Screaming. A man's face, smiling as he burned. You were marked that night, Cardo whispered. Chosen. I stumbled back a step. I didn't choose anything. Cardo tilted Eli's head. Didn't you? He began to walk toward me. Not fast. Not threatening. Just moving like he had all the time in the world. I looked at the dagger. It shook in my hand. My breath came sharp, uneven. You've felt it your whole life, haven't you? He said. The darkness. The questions no priest could answer. The voices you almost thought were your own. He was close now. Eli's skin was pale as bone. His lips were dry, cracked, but still smiling. I can give you peace, Dave. I can give you truth. He reached out a hand, small and shaking. But the voice was still ancient. Or you can spill innocent blood and walk away knowing nothing. The flame above the altar flickered. I looked at the boy, the body he wore. His chest rose and fell, slow, like he was dreaming. But those eyes, still black, still watching. I raised the dagger. My heart pounded like thunder. My knees shook. This wasn't just a child. This wasn't just a demon. This was me. My doubt. My guilt. My anger at a God who never answered. My fear that maybe, just maybe, darkness was the only thing that ever listened. I had to choose. I had seconds. He whispered one last thing before the dagger came down. Welcome home. Then, darkness, silence, and the sound of steel hitting flesh. I never believed in hell, not really. But standing in the crypt beneath St. Alora's chapel, with fire crawling up the stone walls and whispers curling around me like vines, I knew I had stepped into it. The dagger in my hand felt heavier than before. Not metal heavy, soul heavy. It trembled like it knew what it was made for. Eli stood at the altar. Or maybe I should say what used to be Eli. His skin was pale as candle wax, and his small body swayed like a puppet on invisible strings. His black eyes weren't just black anymore, they were bottomless. Inside them, I saw things that didn't belong in any child. I saw burning cities, screaming angels, a mirror of myself, laughing in a voice I didn't recognize. He smiled at me. You came, he said, not as a boy, but as something older, something that had watched empires rise and fall. The flames behind him formed a halo, twisting like living serpents around the stone ceiling. The heat pressed against my back, sweat pouring from my face. My legs wanted to run, but my feet were locked in place. You could have left, the thing said through Eli's mouth. The doors would have opened for you. All you had to do was stop caring. I didn't come to talk, I muttered. You're not staying. He tilted his head, amused. Oh, Dave, still pretending you're a hero? The voice echoed all around me. It was in the stones, in my bones. I could barely remember why I came here. What I was fighting. All I could hear was that voice, sliding into my memories. Remember the fire? It whispered. When you ran out of that church as a boy and left her behind? My heart froze. You told them you tried to save her. But you didn't. You saved yourself. And I was there, Dave. Watching. Waiting. You've always been mine. Eli's body rose into the air. The stone beneath him cracked in a perfect circle. From the break came heat and wind and the scent of ash and blood. Something was coming through. I stepped forward. Every part of me screamed to stop, to turn around, to wake up in my bed and pretend this was just another nightmare from my broken past. But this wasn't a dream. It never was. I gripped the dagger tighter. The blade pulsed. It glowed faintly, as if the truth inside it wanted out. Kill the boy, Cardo said softly now. Gently. That's what they told you, right? That it would end me. His laugh was like ice cracking across a frozen lake. Foolish. The boy died months ago. What you see is only skin. Shell. I live in you now, Dave. He floated closer. His feet didn't touch the ground. His eyes didn't blink. He looked into me, past me. And for a moment, I wanted what he offered. Power. Truth. No more guilt. No more wandering. Just answers. Eternal sight. Peace. You could see her again, he whispered. Your sister. I can open that door. I lowered the dagger. My hands shook. The flames calmed. The crypt fell still. I could finally know, I whispered to myself. What's on the other side? A smile curved on Eli's lips. Then something small, something human flickered in those dark eyes. Not Cardo. Eli. He was still in there. Drowning. Trapped. And he was begging me. Not with words, not with screams, but with the tiniest tear running down his cheek. He was asking me to finish it. I roared and charged forward. Cardo's face twisted into fury. The halo behind him exploded. Fire tore through the ceiling. The sigils screamed in blood-red light. I grabbed Eli by the shoulders. I'm sorry, I whispered. Then I drove the dagger into his heart. The scream that followed didn't come from Eli. It came from everywhere. The walls, the stone, the air, it howled. My ears bled. My vision split. A blast of pure heat threw me back across the crypt. I slammed against the far wall and blacked out. I woke up coughing ash. The church was gone. Not burned. Not ruined. Gone like it had never existed. I stood on scorched earth under a gray sky. Nothing moved. No birds. No wind. Just the smell of something ancient that had finally died. In the distance, I saw a figure walking away, a woman holding the hand of a small boy. Eli? I blinked. They vanished. It's been 3 months. People say I imagined it all, that the church never existed, that there's no record of a boy named Eli in Hollow's Reach. They locked me up in a psychiatric ward for stress-induced hallucinations. Maybe they're right. But at night, when the lights go out and the room gets cold, I still hear his voice in the back of my head. Not Cardo. The boy. Thank you. And somewhere deep inside, I wonder if a door really did open, and whether I'm the one who walked through it. Because sometimes, when I look in the mirror, my eyes aren't brown anymore. They're pitch black.